We are just one day away from a full Sunday slate of Week 6 fantasy football games, guys. And we do this on every single Saturday. We are going through our must-start and must-sit running backs for Week 6 fantasy football. We're going through every single matchup on Sunday and Monday. So make sure to watch to the very end to catch every single matchup of the weekend. And guys, we are so close to hitting 6,000 subscribers on this channel. So please go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So let's go ahead and just dive right into these matchups. So at the first matchup, we've got the Ravens and Titans. And just to say right out of the gate, this is a London game, guys. It will be starting at 8:30 a.m. Central, so make sure to have your lineup set by Saturday night. I am putting this out there on Saturday morning. Make sure to put it out there tonight that you've got your starting lineup set, because it will likely be happening by the time you are awake. And really the only start guy I've got is Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry's not even a high-end starter at this point. I've discussed my issues with Derrick Henry for the past several weeks, actually. Derrick Henry, at this point, what we need from him is volume, because he's not efficient. He's averaging less than 4 yards per carry. And what we need also is for him to get in the end zone to have real upside in fantasy football. Well, there's a couple of problems here. Tyjae Spears is the clear third down back. It's not close. He's handling basically every third down touch and every third down rep in general for the entire season at this point. So Derrick Henry, there's some problems there, but Derrick Henry is still capable of breaking off massive runs, and he's still very capable of finding the end zone multiple times in the game, so you don't sit Derrick Henry still. And Tyjae Spears, I've got him as a better flex option than both of the Ravens running backs. My flex and starter tiers, those guys are in accordance with my weekly rankings. And I've got Tyjae Spears as a better start option than both Ravens. Why? Because none of them have great volume. So what it comes down to is who's the higher upside player. And that's Tyjae Spears. Tyjae Spears has been efficient. He finally found the end zone last week. I think Tyjae Spears is not a great flex option, but I would take him over Gus Edwards or Justice Hill, who they're getting basically both like 12 to 10 carries per game, but they're averaging like 3 to 4 yards per carry, and they're barely getting in the end zone. It's just not very much upside, and neither of them are pass catchers either. And you go ahead and you sit everybody else. Panthers at Dolphins is our next matchup here. Raheem Mostert, this week on my running back rankings video, I had him as a top 3 running back, and I stand by that. Devon Achane is out. Jeff Wilson is doubtful. So there's really no option here besides Raheem Mostert, and the matchup is absolutely amazing. The matchup is fantastic. So yes, Raheem Mostert, fire him up on Sunday. Chuba Hubbard, I think he's a fine flex option. For those of you who don't know, Miles Sanders has already been ruled out for this game, and Chuba Hubbard has been the only other running back who has handled 1 carry this season. The only other running back on the Carolina Panthers team. So it's going to be Chuba Hubbard that you want out of this backfield. But by the way, I wouldn't want any of them. Like, Chuba Hubbard will be a flex option just based on volume. But for example, I would start Tyjae Spears over Chuba Hubbard myself personally, because the Panthers are going to get down very early in this game. They're not going to have much to run with. And then everybody else is a must sit. Like I said, Jeff Wilson's out. Miles Sanders is out. There's really only 2 running back options in this game. And we've got one in must-start territory as a top 3 running back, and the other one is a middle-tier flex option. Saints at Texans is our next matchup here. You start Alvin Kamara with full confidence. The guy looks really, really good. And not only does he look good, but he's the only option they got. Kendre Miller's not getting it done. So Alvin Kamara is so clearly a must-start guy because the volume is there, the playmaking ability is still there, and Derek Carr is still dealing with an injury as well. So there's been a lot of checkdowns to Alvin Kamara since Alvin Kamara came back into the fold. Dameon Pierce is flex territory. I actually have said on several live streams and videos that I actually do think Dameon Pierce is a little bit of an ascending asset. I think he's getting better. I would not go as far as to call him a must-start yet, though, because the Texans are still not having much success on the ground, and this is a tough matchup here against the New Orleans Saints. So yes, I do think that he's good enough because he's handling volume, and this Texans offense is getting better each and every week. but I still don't consider him a must-start in this type of matchup. Devin Singletary, Kendre Miller, you sit both these guys. Kendre Miller, he's been a massive disappointment, and Devin Singletary just is not doing well enough, and he's not efficient enough behind that Texans O-line. Commanders at Falcons is the next matchup here. Obviously, you keep starting Bijan Robinson. You absolutely keep starting him. Listen, he's going to have good games. He's going to have bad games. This is a game he's going to be very good in, I think. I've got Bijan Robinson as a top 4 running back this week because he's just like the Commanders are giving up points. They're bleeding points. So I think that this is a matchup that he'll absolutely take advantage of. And he's still their best option on offense. He's their best weapon. It's not particularly close. Brian Robinson, I think, is a must start this week because the Falcons defense is not very good. And I do think that when you look at Brian Robinson's workload over the past several weeks, that has been largely, it's been low, largely due to the fact that they are just not competitive in these games lately. I think they'll be more competitive this week, and they'll have to give Brian Robinson more opportunities because they can't throw the ball all that well. Tyler Algier, I called him my underdog flex running back of the week this week because when you looked at last week, he handled 17 carries. He had 17 carries again. So the volume was back. Is it going to be back entirely? I don't know about that. I'm not going to predict his volume, but what I will say is in this type of matchup, with that type of volume last week, I think Tyler Algier could find the end zone. So deeper shot, I don't think you have to go out there and automatically put him in your lineup, but he is an option in deeper leagues or if you're really desperate with bye weeks or injuries, and then everybody else is irrelevant. If you have Antonio Gibson at this point, guys, public service announcement, drop him. He's literally dead weight on your team, and he's just taking up a bench spot. Colts at Jaguars is the next matchup here, and obviously Travis Etienne has been a baller, and that's exactly what I thought would happen. Travis Etienne is one of the best players on this offense. He's fantastic. And the guy that everybody thought was going to be relevant, Tank Bigsby, yeah, he's completely irrelevant. So, he gets a couple carries a week. It's very similar to the Zamir White situation with Josh Jacobs, as I predicted before the season. So, just had to trumpet that there a little bit. Travis Etienne is absolutely must start. He's going to be just fine every single week, and he's obviously got potential to boom. Jonathan Taylor, I'm starting him this week, even with Zach Moss's big week last week, and here's the reason why. Number one, this team signed him to a $42 million deal with over half of the value of the contract guaranteed. So what does that tell you? What it tells you is that this Colts team made an investment on Jonathan Taylor, a very hefty running back investment. They're going to use him. And why was it not last week? Well, because he had basically just gotten back to the building and he didn't even have interest, and he was not healthy up until recently. So was he ever going to get 20 plus touches in his first week back? Absolutely not. But this week as well, Zach Moss has been reported, and Coach Shane Steichen has said it himself, Jonathan Taylor's workload is going to significantly increase this week. And Zach Moss, as a result, his workload's going to go down. So to transition to Zach Moss, I don't think that he's a must sit. I think you could still start him based on what he's done. And what I think, maybe he'll get 10 touches this week. I think he's a decent flex option, but I would not go out of my way to flex him or put him on my starting lineup. That's for sure. Tank Bigsby is a sit, like I said earlier. He's just not getting the upside. Seahawks at Bengals here. Kenneth Walker is a must-start guy. I've been getting a lot of questions about Kenneth Walker this week, and while I appreciate everybody's question and understand where people are coming from, I think we're forgetting about Kenneth Walker a little bit. This guy was a top 3 running back through the first 4 weeks of the season, and the only reason he dropped last week is because they had a bye week. Kenneth Walker has been outstanding in fantasy football. You play him. In fact, this is one of my favorite matchups of the week for fantasy football purposes. I think there's going to be a lot of points in this matchup. So I got Kenneth Walker for sure. And honestly, Joe Mixon, he's going to continue to be a must-start guy. And the reason is because the offense is getting better. The offense is improving. If they can build on what they did last week, this offense is going to look better, and Joe Mixon will be better as a result, because Joe Mixon is really, at this point, not in his physical prime, so he relies on the passing game to get his running game going, and that's exactly what I think is about to happen during the middle portion of the season. Nobody's in flex territory. Both of these guys are the clear workhorse running backs on their team. And Zach Charbonnet is one of those guys I can understand taking a deep shot on Zach Charbonnet, but I'm not going to do it personally, and I'm not going to tell my audience to do it because Kenneth Walker has so clearly been the lead back of this offense. Vikings at Bears is the next matchup here. Nobody's must start. Nobody. The Vikings are way too dependent on the pass, and the Bears are down to their third running back. Now, with that being said, I think Alexander Mattison is a relatively decent flex option because I've had concerns over the weeks about him losing work. It really hasn't happened, but the reality is, even if he's the starting running back, he's just not getting that much work because this offense does not run the ball much. They're pass first, and yes, it's going to stay the same even with Justin Jefferson out. Alexander Mattison, I think the matchup is okay here. The Bears have been giving up a lot of points, and I think that Alexander Mattison is just, he's fine. That's the best word I could come up with it. D'Onta Foreman is also in flex territory. This is an offense that has looked way better over the last several weeks, and this also taking on a Vikings defense that is not good, and it's a team that's actually starting to reel a little bit. The Vikings could be in the top 5 of draft order at some point. So I think D'Onta Foreman is a decent start. He's done this over the years. He comes in, he fills in nicely, and gives you a good fantasy performance when you're desperate. And everybody else is a must-sit in this matchup. 49ers at Browns here is the next matchup. And obviously, Christian McCaffrey's must start. What else is there to talk about? Jerome Ford is flex, though. Jerome Ford, I have said it for weeks now. I think he's just an overrated fantasy asset. He is. And the matchup this week is not going to help his case for me. It's not a good matchup here. And without Deshaun Watson again, this team is way too predictable. Jerome Ford is not going to have a good day on Sunday. I will take that to the bank for sure. And if I get it wrong, of course I'll call myself out on it. Kareem Hunt, I'm still sitting him. I just haven't seen enough yet from Kareem Hunt in practice or in the game that he's played. So Kareem Hunt, still sitting him until I see otherwise. Everybody else is a sit. Patriots at Raiders is the next matchup here. Josh Jacobs is obviously going to be a must-start guy moving forward. Past 2 weeks, very, very good performances. And he's also taking on a team that is absolutely abysmal right now. They're awful. Awful. So Josh Jacobs continues to be a must-start guy, and he's actually giving you the value that you wanted early in the season when you drafted him before the season. Ramondre Stevenson is flex. Honestly, I've had Ramondre Stevenson circled as a buy low guy around this time of the year for weeks now because this is the first real break of the Patriots schedule. But at the same time, this team is so bad. They're so bad. And I think they've got a lot of issues in the culture right now. So that's not good for any of the players. And while I do think Ramondre Stevenson will still be the workhorse, the lead back in this offense, and I do think this is the best matchup they've seen all year, basically, I'm still not telling you guys Ramondre is a must-start right now. Zeke is not, I'm not considering Zeke. He hasn't been getting the workload that Ramondre is getting, and nobody, if anybody has upside in this offense, it's going to be Ramondre in my opinion, and then everybody else is a must-sit. Lions at Buccaneers is the next matchup here, and obviously Dave Montgomery has been a massive beast, a massive hit in the middle rounds of the 2023 fantasy football drafts. You continue to play David Montgomery because not only has he been a hit, and not only did I say that before the start of the season, but Jahmyr Gibbs is also out again. So Dave Montgomery, clear workhorse back here. Dan Campbell even said it a couple days ago. There's no questions here when it comes to David Montgomery and his fantasy upside. Rachaad White is in flex territory. Relatively decent flex option because Rachaad White has looked okay and he's definitely been handling the workload for the Buccaneers this year. The matchup isn't great though. The Lions are a good team. I don't really think Rachaad White is going to be a must-start for me many times this year because he's just not very efficient with his touches that he gets. So he needs volume and he needs to get in the end zone. And right now the volume is not always there. And at the same time, touchdowns are largely unpredictable, especially for Rachaad White, and everybody else is a sit. Cardinals at Rams, the next matchup here. Kyren Williams is a start still. Like, you've seen it over the year. Kyren Williams has a couple good games, and he's also got a couple stinkers. There's really not been much of an in-between with Kyren Williams. It's either you're getting a massive boom game or you're getting a pretty decent bust game. Not much in between there. I'm taking Kyren Williams still. He's still clearly the lead back in this offense. And last week was different because they took on a much tougher opponent in the Philadelphia Eagles, and they were really physically dominated in that game. This is a different week. The Cardinals, as competitive as they've been, and honestly, I think the Cardinals will put up points and keep it competitive. I still think Kyren Williams is going to be able to run on this defense. I've got no questions really with Kyren Williams. I've called him a sell high guy over the weeks, and I still do think he is, but if you've got him, you definitely start Kyren Williams. Keontae Ingram and Amari DeMarcado, they're in flex territory. And yes, when I said earlier this week in my waiver wire video, I called a lot of those guys fool's gold. And this is exactly the reason why. Amari DeMarcado, the guy that a lot of people were picking up this week, yeah, he's been listed as second on the depth chart behind Keontae Ingram for this game. There's no guarantees which one of them is going to get the volume, so I don't really want to trust either of them. But I think the Rams defense is one that can be taken advantage of. And at the same time, I do think the Cardinals will run the ball. And I think there's a chance they both get like 10 to 12 touches, or one of them just gets like 17 touches and the other one gets like 5. So I don't know which way to lean. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say I don't know which way to lean. I'm leaning Keontae Ingram, but I do think Amari DeMarcado, there's a chance he does get a lot of volume because he handled all the volume last week when James Conner went down. Everybody else is a sit. Eagles at Jets is the next matchup here. DeAndre Swift is must start. DeAndre Swift has been excellent in fantasy football. He's one of the most efficient running backs in football right now. He's averaging almost 6 yards per carry. It's unbelievable. The offensive line is tremendous. DeAndre Swift is evolving into the player we thought he could be. It's excellent. You got to take advantage of DeAndre Swift right now. I've gotten pushback from Breece Hall all week. I am sticking with this. Breece Hall is not a must start. I love the player Breece Hall is. I feel like I have to say this every time I talk about him because I love him so much. He is a top 2 dynasty running back to me. I've got him in dynasty. I would not trade him for a lot of things. But this week, it's going to come back down to earth. The Eagles defense is way better than the Chiefs defense, which has been good, and of course the Broncos defense. The past 2 weeks have been encouraging. I like the fact that he's not splitting touches with an uninterested Dalvin Cook anymore, but still, to me, this is just too big of a matchup change. They're going to get physically dominated, I think, by the Eagles. I think it's going to be a massive bust game for a lot of Jets. While I do acknowledge that Breece will be here in flex because he's not only a volume play at this point, but he's also just a tremendous talent that I love, he's not must start. I'm sorry. Kenneth Gainwell, you sit him. I just don't think that the upside is really there. He's not as good of a player as Swift, so while he does get some volume, I just don't see the upside there. And then Dalvin Cook, honestly, you don't even need him on your team. You could drop Dalvin Cook at this point. He's uninterested, and he's just not very good anymore. And everybody else, that's it. Giants and Bills, the Sunday night game. Saquon Barkley is questionable this week. I have a feeling he's going to play, but proceed with caution. If we don't hear anything by Saturday night or by Sunday morning before game time, be careful. Be careful, and I would probably not start Saquon, but if he plays and we get word that he's playing, of course you start him. I don't care how tough the matchup is. The minute that Saquon Barkley steps back onto the field, he becomes the offense. The entire offense. I don't care. I'm still starting Saquon Barkley, even with a backup quarterback, because in reality, it's probably not going to make much of a difference here. James Cook is still a must-start for me. I get it. Last week was bad. He had negative yards. I had to look this over several times this week because I thought I was seeing stuff that wasn't there. James Cook had 5 carries and negative 4 rushing yards last week. So bad. So bad. I'm still starting him, though, because if there's a defense out there that can cure this kind of problem, it's the New York Giants defense. And James Cook, other than last week, has been a very good option in fantasy football. Don't panic on James Cook. Nobody's in flex territory, and you sit Damian Harris and you sit Matt Breida. It's not worth it for both of those guys. And if Saquon doesn't go, it doesn't matter. You do not play Matt Breida. It's been just awful for the New York Giants this year offensively. It's just bad. Cowboys and Chargers, the Monday night game. You start Austin Eckler. He's back, baby. He is back. and you play him with full confidence. Because the reality is he's been excellent when he played. And the other reality is last year, when Mike Evans missed time, Austin Eckler's targets went up. That's going to happen. Austin Eckler is about to see probably between 5 to 10 targets per game for the next, until the end of the year. Austin Eckler is going to be super important. He is definitely a top 3 fantasy running back immediately. Tony Pollard, you continue to start Tony Pollard. It hasn't been terrible for Tony Pollard over the past several weeks, but it's not been great. It's not what you were used to the first couple of weeks. I think this is a get-right game for Tony Pollard. The Chargers defense is not very good. In fact, they're not good at all. So, Tony Pollard, it's a get-right game. I have full trust in Tony Pollard. Flex territory, nobody, because no other running back is relevant. So let me know what questions you need answered before Week 6 Fantasy Football in the comments below. And if you want to see the top 12 defense rankings for Week 6 Fantasy Football, click on this video right here.